Welcome to the Brief on Grief. As always, I'm your host, Walter Sanderson, and I'm so glad that you joined us for another episode. On our last episode, we talked about how grief is difficult in dealing with grief on those special days, those birthdays, those holidays, the anniversaries, my birthdays, and how we had to just kind of be prepared for when they come upon us. On this episode, I want to help us deal with how to handle these days so they don't sneak up on us. I want you to be mindful that these special days on the calendar that we deal with from time to time, there are many triggers. Simple things can remind us of our loved ones, and I have a few questions for somebody on today. How many of you have these difficult days? And if you do realize that they were difficult, how hard was it for you to handle them? I want to talk about on this episode what you and I can do. And it's important that grief, when we think about our grief, it's important for us to remember that grief invites us to remember. Grief doesn't invite us to forget. So it's helpful when we try not to ignore that these days are coming. It's helpful to try to acknowledge that they will be coming and try not to pretend like these days don't exist. For starters, it's impossible for us to do that anyway. And it actually places more stress on us as we're trying to grieve by trying to ignore the day or actually act like it doesn't exist instead of facing it head on. And so with that being said, I want you to make sure that you begin the process of dealing with these days when you're ready to. What I mean by that is you want to make sure these days that come, the holidays, the birthdays, that you deal with the days when you're ready to, and not because you're forced to, and not because somebody else believes it's time for you to do so. So here's a good place to begin. Hopefully you have yourself a counselor, but the best thing to do when these days are approaching is to have somebody that you can talk to about these days. Somebody that you can tell how stressful these days are. For the widow, you want to be able to talk to somebody about how much you miss your husband, how much you miss your wife. For the average person, it's just being able to talk to somebody that can listen to you stress how hard it is just to get past this one particular day. And I want you to know that this may seem minor to an onlooker, but you can't imagine how difficult it is for a mom. There is a mom out there that lost her child. And no one can imagine how difficult it is when that child's birthday comes and the mom realizes that she will no longer celebrate the birthdays of that child or that child is gone. It's always a reminder, even if the child was killed or even if the child died from a sickness. And for somebody, I'm hoping this episode helps you because 2024, yes, next year will be the first year that you don't have your mother, will be the first year that your father is not around when Mother's Day and Father's Day comes. I could share with you that the first Sunday after Labor Day is always tough for me. And a lot of people may not know, but that is Grandparents' Day. Y'all know in this country, we celebrate about every single thing and every single person. And it's a reminder of me that on Grandparents' Day, that my grandmother, my loving grandmother, Leanna Moore, is no longer with us. I also want you to know that you have to be careful on these days, these special days, not to be forced or pressured into celebrating them when you're not able to deal with them, because they will add more stress and do more damage to you emotionally when doing so. We all know we can't rush our grieving process, but I want you to know you don't have to celebrate these days, these holidays, if you're not ready to, and you don't have to feel guilty when others tell you or invite you to attend if you choose not to. When I think about these days and when I sit with clients of mine, one thing that is helpful for me, and definitely helpful for them, is as the day is approaching, I want somebody to start to write about that upcoming day. I want you to write about what it might feel like, the anxiety that it brings on, possibly depression and sadness. I want you to write about how this day makes you feel. How does Christmas feel different this year than it did last year? How does Thanksgiving feel different this year than it did last year? And so, whatever day it may be, because there's going to be a series of them, I want you to take a moment to write about how this day is difficult. I think about times, for example, I write about the day of what it's like not seeing my grandmother in the kitchen cooking. I write about what it's like not being able to eat Thanksgiving dinner for breakfast. And I say that to you all just to share a little something. My grandmother was always one that had her food prepared very early. And so I write about those small things of not being able to go and see her, and just the absence of her and how hard it is. But I also want to share with somebody, especially those of us with children, you want to be mindful of these days. And the reason you want to write about them and be prepared about them is because there are times that these dates, especially when we're dealing with our children, the dates mean so much more to them than they do us. And so, for example, Santa Claus and Rudolph and Frosty the Snowman, that doesn't matter to us anymore. But we have children at times that are looking forward to this day of opening gifts. And so we always have to be mindful of that for the mother who lost her mother, but her children want to celebrate her. It's a bittersweet moment, but I want you to also know that you can get through it if you're prepared for when it comes. You know, I also want to say this to somebody, because sometimes people tell me in sessions that they feel guilty because they're having fun since the loved one has left. And I want you to know that it is okay to have fun. It's okay to smile. It is okay for you to keep living. Grief in itself, I want you to know, handling these days is very difficult. But here is what you want to do. This is why I encourage you to be able to talk to somebody about the day that's coming, for you to be able to write about it, is because I want you to be proactive if you can, instead of being reactive. Our grief sometimes overwhelms us when we are reactive instead of proactive. So I want to give somebody a few options, because I want you to be able to control the day that's coming and not allow the day to control you. And whatever you are able to do on this day, whether it's just share a few laughs, whether it's just a smile, whatever you do, no matter how small it is, anything you do is more than you had to do. And I want you to know that it is progress. And so I had a question for somebody that they sent me after viewing the last episode. And they said that they still cry uncontrollably on these special days. And it's been years now, and they feel like they should be over this already. And if that's you and that's how you feel as well, let me help you while I help them. No, you should not be over it already. There is no timetable when you should be over it. The people we lose in life, it's never for us to get over, but it's for us to accept and adjust a way that helps us to continue to live. It's never for us to get over, but for us to accept and be able to adjust with them being gone. And as I stated in the beginning of our discussion, those special occasions, you have to be careful because they bring on anniversary depression. But I also want you to know, together, you and I, we can all be able to accept, adjust, and we'll be able to move forward because we're going to be proactive and not reactive. And we're going to do our very best when we're ready to control the day and not let the day control us. Well, I just want to say thank you for tuning in for this episode on the Brief on Grief. And as always, I hope this discussion was helpful. And if it was helpful for you or somebody you may know, please share it with them. And I ask you all to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to the podcast on Spotify and iHeart. And as always, you and I know somebody that is grieving. And that somebody might be you. Thank you for tuning in for this episode on the Brief on Grief.